It's Halloween in the Rust Belt community of Oil City. 12-year-old Shauna Howe is leaving a Girl Scout party. Her best friend offers to walk her the extra block home. Shauna goes it alone. She would never be seen alive again. And Halloween would change forever.
I used to love Halloween. I used to love to dress the kids up. Shauna loved Halloween too. She loved trick-or-treating. She loved just anything to do with it. That year, she wanted to be a gymnast. I remember that morning, Shauna come over and she says, "Mom, I've got the Girl Scouts tonight. We've got the Halloween thing. We're going up to the nursing home."
She got dressed in her outfit. She had tights on and a bodysuit, and she had gloves on her arms, I believe.
She gave me a kiss and a hug and told me she loved me. And then she was gone. And that was it. They got out of Girl Scouts at between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. Shauna and Joey L had left together. Nobody was there to pick up Shauna because I forgot. They come out of the alley where the Girl Scout meeting was, and at the corner there, Joey L went straight down, and Shauna made the left and was coming up the street.
I was looking for her as it was getting dark. I believe the time changed just that week or so. Lucy calls, and I said, "You know, Shauna ain't home yet. What time's that Girl Scout stuff?" She says, "That should have been over."
I started getting worried. I mean, even the latest party for the Girl Scouts wouldn't last that late. I told John to call like the hospitals to see if there'd been any type of accidents or anything, because I didn't have a cell phone. But by the time I got home, it was 10 o'clock. There's no way she'd have been out there that long. And that's when I started panicking. I just called the police. The police showed up, and they come to the house.
Maybe she was lost. Maybe she stayed at a friend's. I think that was the hope. And then other reports started coming in.
You know how they have the little walkie-talkie things, and there was a squeaky thing on there. They had this guy, Peyton, at the police barracks, and he's saying that they seen the girl being taken. And that's how I found out that Shauna was kidnapped.
Dan Payton was walking on West First Street in Oil City. He saw a little girl walking on the other side of the street. He then sees a tall, skinny guy wearing a ball cap. He hears a short scream.
She was grabbed and taken into a car that left immediately. Dan thought it was a small red car.
This is before the cell phones. So then he now, at 8 o'clock at night, has to knock on doors to have somebody call the police station.
I was a patrol officer on the night shift, 11 at night till 7 in the morning. We got called in to help look for Shauna Howe. There's a lot of emotion involved. There's a little girl missing. How could this happen? It was almost unbelievable. One of our children was missing.
Right away, we set up a roadblock. You stop people, you talk to them, you ask them if they'd seen anything suspicious.
Everybody's looking. Early on, at least 20 to 30 law enforcement officers looking for Shauna. We're looking everywhere. We're talking to people on the street, going back over again to the intersections, the area. We start to look for the vehicle. Driving the streets, just literally doing grid patterns up and down every street, every alley. There was that urgency and that concern. After 24 hours, the likelihood of finding them alive decreases almost by the minute.
We knew nothing. Just wandered the house all night long. I don't remember sitting down. I remember when the light broke the next morning, word got out everywhere. And I remember looking out the window. There's all these people in my front yard. A lot of them were friends, family. There were some people that I didn't even know.
Local people started gathering to go out and do their own searches.
That's how this community responds. There were hundreds of people out, volunteers, just walking and looking. The general consensus was fear. And the pressure to bring that child home for the community and the parents was unbelievable.
I wanted to go out and search. You know, the cops are like, no, stay here in case somebody calls. What if it's a kidnapping, you know, and they want a ransom or something? So they wouldn't let me out of the house. You ever see like a caged lion just walking back and forth and back and forth? That's what that living room feels like. It's like walking around in circles because there's no place else to go. You just want to scream at the top of your lungs. Just let me out. But nobody would.
Coulter's Hole. It's a hunting area, some swimming. It's secluded, it's private. People go out there to drink maybe alcohol underage, use drugs, those type of things.
In that area, there are some camps. And one fella was driving away from his camp to go home, and he noticed something under a bridge.
We got a call that they found something, and they specifically wanted me to identify it. I walked up to it and took a close look at it. There in the bush was her bodysuit. It had been there like overnight. The moisture was like on it.
I was on patrol duty at the time. I was called down to the scene. When I arrived, I learned what had been discovered. It now had become very serious. They tested the gymnastic suit. There were several sentinel deposits on the suit.
I'd known that with the gym clothes being there that way, that she had been raped or molested somehow.
The lab in Erie knew that they had a semen stain. And there was enough on there to get DNA. As long as Shauna's missing and we don't know where she's at, there's a chance that we might be able to find her.
You always want them to come back alive. And until you prove to me that she's not, we're looking for her like she is.
The day after the bodysuit was found, we were at the station and a call came in. This guy had gone to a nearby cottage down by Coulter's Hole. And he said, I just walked out on the bridge and I looked down and there she was. She wasn't there the day before because we were out there.
Her shoes were found on the bridge. and there was a candy wrapper in close proximity. The area was combed by law enforcement the day before, and then she's found there at daylight, clearly indicating that the kidnapper had went back in during the dark with the child and then killed Shauna and disposed of her body there. To have the veracity to go into that area with the victim on the opportunity of getting caught, it was a taunt. Just like the shoes on the bridge. The likelihood of those shoes being found on the bridge, one facing one direction, one facing the other, and not falling off the bridge, it was placed there. And that denotes a sophistication that is not common among criminals. So, who killed Shauna Howe? Somebody was toying with us. Look what I did. Can you catch me?
The body's found on a Friday. It was dark, and from where the body was, there's nothing from there until the next roadway. It was a little girl. She was thrown from the trestle, which was over 33 feet high, down to the creek bed. There was, of course, physical evidence of injuries that she sustained. Her knees were scuffed and scraped. We believe that she was alive when she was thrown from the trestle. She was alive probably for 5-10 minutes, something or other, before she died. You know, I'll never forget what happened to her.
So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear clump, clump, clump coming up the steps. My brother Keith literally falls in my lap and says, it's Shauna. I'm like, no, it can't be. It just can't. And Claire wraps his arms around me, and he says, it is, sis. I seen her. And I said no. And I lost it.
Lucy started crying and let out a wail that I'll never forget. I mean, it's one of those wails that goes to your soul. You know what it is. It speaks to something very primal in you. And it's the wail of a mother losing a child.
They canceled Halloween. People were keeping a real close eye on their kids. They weren't letting them out. When you have a body of that little girl, it's hard not to get a little bit emotional, but you have to look at it objectively too. We had DNA. That was the start.
It was a blood hunt.
If this case was going to be solved, you had to find a match for that DNA.
A stranger abduction is more rare than an abduction from someone that knows the victim. So you have to look first at the family.
We DNA tested her stepdad, John Brown. We DNA tested the uncles. We looked at them hard, okay?
They even wanted a DNA test for my son. And I looked at him and I said, "You want what?" And of course they're saying it's to eliminate him. Finally, John got me calmed down enough, and Carrie, John's like, "Mom, just let me do it."
Yeah, we took a DNA sample from the boy. He was probably old enough to ejaculate. You have to start getting into everybody that she was involved with. We got into her school looking for admirers, anything like that. Went through all of the Girl Scouts and their parents.
It was an intense search. There was nobody not looked at.
But we never got a hit. I felt like I was leaving a stone unturned, you know what I mean? That night, we knew that she was grabbed and probably taken into a car. There was a description of a tall, thin guy in a small red car. One of the people we were looking at was Bill Crabtree, the guy who found the body. What was he doing out there? Is he trying to throw everybody off? He was driving a small red car.
They went through the vehicle, they looked for evidence. Obviously, they got his DNA. None of that matched.
But then somebody called in and said that the description fit the guy named Ted Walker.
Ted Walker met Shauna at the pizza shop. If Walker was working, for some reason, he'd always want to give the girls a hug. And the girls would run from Walker so that he couldn't touch them.
We know he's familiar with the family and that he had a small red car.
But eventually the DNA cleared him too.
So many dead ends. Looking at family, friends, other possible motives, it just came up blank.
One of the main things I did was to interview folks around the neighborhoods where Shauna lived who had not been thoroughly investigated. Now, Michael Pruitt came under suspicion because he lived just a couple of doors down from the location of the abduction. Very suspicious guy. The day after her corpse was found, he got on a bus and left town. He became top of the list as far as potential suspect.
Michael Pruitt's house was searched.
There was a cubbyhole that had been described to us. Shauna, at autopsy, she had injuries to her knees. They were scuffed and scraped. She was kept somewhere. This cubbyhole would have been a good place where a child could have been contained.
Somebody would have had to keep Shauna alive for 3 days. Michael Pruitt's house was searched.
We looked at him very, very hard.
The primary focus was on this cubbyhole that he had beneath the stairway. When his DNA didn't match, believe me, that everybody was upset.
There were at least 100 DNA samples taken in this investigation.
Back then, you couldn't get a DNA sample with a swab. We had to take them in for blood tests. Anybody that I looked at hard, I got DNA samples from them.
There's a reason they took 100 DNA samples. That was somebody that somebody was looking at and saying to themselves, here's our suspect. The list was going on and on and on.
You didn't do anything wrong. Let's get your name out of it. I couldn't tell you how many of those we did over that couple of years period. All the DNA tests came back negative. It was negative with all of them. It was negative with all of them.
I'm on my night off. I get a call from Officer Tom McClellan. He said, Winter, we need you down here. Somebody just tried to abduct a girl. I said, what? They tried to kidnap her. They beat her up pretty bad. She's down here. I need you down here. She was walking down the street. He stalked her. He followed her out and tried to bushwhack her. It's a violent attack. And they're trying to put somebody in the trunk of a car who's capable of doing something like this. Jimmy O'Brien is. Tim and Jim O'Brien were brothers. Timmy older than Jim. There wasn't a cop here that didn't know the O'Briens. They're sexually violent offenders. Jimmy in particular. The guy's evil. The victim said, I just know if I'd gotten in the trunk, I'd be dead. So I fought with everything I had. I arrested Jimmy for attempted kidnapping. This crime. It was on the same route that Shauna had walked home. It was on East 2nd Street, the same area she had left and went through. We were still having our meetings about Shauna Howe. And I said, have you looked at the O'Briens?
We knew who the O'Briens were. I arrested both of them many times, but they couldn't have done Shauna's kidnapping because they had been in jail when that occurred.
There still were no answers. I bought a computer and got the internet, and they had that thing on there where you could go and see where all the pedophiles were around you and stuff. And when I pulled that up, I got the shock of my life of how many pedophiles lived around me. The person that took my daughter and killed her could be walking up and down the street in front of my house, and I wouldn't know it.
Around Halloween, we always had extra patrols. Because when you don't know who did it, you don't know when they'll do it again. That killer's still out there. There's always dread every time a child came up missing for 30 minutes and you found him at the neighbor's. Oh my gosh, did this happen again? It was the 5-year anniversary of the day they found Shauna Howe, that Shanae Freeman came up missing out of her backyard. 5-year-old little girl, gone, disappeared. The family looks for a period of time before they call us. So it is going from dusk to dark. Darkness conceals a lot of evil and a lot of things.
That's 5 years later, there's still no arrests, there's still no suspects. So the fear kicked back in again. Are they at it again?
When I came down to the station, there's hundreds of people waiting outside, wanting to hear something. It was fear. There's nothing but fear that gripped the community. How could this happen again? I was thinking about Shauna Howe. I asked God, get me on my best game, man. Give me help. Because that same fear was still there. It's getting dark. The boogeyman's out there. He's back.
We heard that another girl had went missing. That brought up the idea of, could it be connected? Because it was around Halloween time too. And we decided to go and help that family because their daughter was missing, their child was missing.
There was a tremendous amount of pressure put on those persons investigating this case, but we had a whole different game. We were ready here. Search was immediately put underway. We had no eyewitnesses that observed her abduction, so we wanted to talk to anyone that was in the search party or around the scene at the time of the incident. There was a young man that didn't look right. His name was Nicholas Bowen. I saw him hugging Shanae's mother, and he said, "We're going to help. We're going to find your daughter and bring her home." When I talked to him, his body language, it didn't seem right. When you get in close to someone like this, they'll start to lean into you. And if you can just casually physically touch them, they'll collapse on you if you got it right. I said, "I'm asking for your help because I think something bad happened." He laid his head in my chest and started to cry, and he's like, "She's hurt bad. She's bleeding bad." And I said, "I've seen a lot of people bleed bad and live. You gotta get me to her." We discovered Shanae buried in a shallow grave. When you see what's done with a child, it's just evil.
I heard that mother let out that scream, and I knew what it was. Once you hear it, you would understand it because it's the most soul-touching scream that a woman will ever let out.
Most people knew that he'd been arrested. There's a couple hundred people across the street easy. He was 6'2", 200 some pounds. You know, a man by every other standard but his age. He was only 17 and a half. That would have put him at 12 at the time. Nicholas Bowen was too young to have been involved in Shauna Howe's murder.
When they said that they had found the guy and that he wouldn't have been old enough when Shauna was murdered, I was mad. I mean, I've been waiting 5 years and there's still nothing. You don't have any more information to give me in 97 than you did in 92. From the outside looking in, what have you done?
The leads slowed. Sometimes nobody would call anything in for weeks. After a while, it got to a point where I was pretty much on my own. Somewhere around that time, I retired. And it went cold.
He said, "It's basically a cold case. It's basically dead." I said, "Yeah, so's my daughter."
The investigation grinds to a halt, and time moves on. But the Howe family still needs answers. No longer a patrolman, Rich Graham now works as a detective to close the Howe case.
You're trained not to become personally involved in any case, but how do you not, particularly a child who's murdered this way?
He came to the house one day and he introduced himself. He looked me right directly in the eyes and he says, "I'm gonna solve this." You know, there was no hesitation. After years waiting for somebody to do anything, it felt good.
I continued to carry a normal caseload.
He had, I believe, 72 cases. But every night, he was reading the Shauna Howe case.
I'm slow.
He's dyslexic.
When I read something, I read it several times to make sure it sinks in and I've got it right. Sometimes the second or third look, you'll see maybe a word or a phrase that you didn't pick up on the first time.
He looked at the autopsy photos and he looked at the coroner's report and he said, "This doesn't make sense."
One of the things was a mark we saw on her cheek. It appeared to be a partial shoe print. And there was not even any mention of that in the autopsy. Betsy and I went to see Helbert Fillinger, a renowned medical examiner. We reviewed photos of Shauna's corpse. Helbert agreed that that appeared to be a shoe print we saw on her cheek. He said this was a violent rape. Pretty sick. He said somehow they held her in captivity for a couple of days, but there's no evidence of any restraints. That suggested to him that it was quite possible that more than one person was involved. For many years, I always believed that it probably was just one person. This was an oh moment.
This is not one person. This is most likely two and probably more.
There was only DNA from one suspect on Shauna's body. And that may be the basis for thinking there was only one person involved. But that's not necessarily true. Just because you don't have a DNA match does not mean that the person wasn't involved or had knowledge of the crime or assisted in some way.
We decide to do a big sweep again. We go back to all the local departments. One of the places we went was the fire department. 1992. Fire department got called to a fire in a red car. That car belonged to Ted Walker. Ted Walker's name had been brought up numerous times. He had met Shauna at a pizza place. Walker opened his house to young kids in the area. It was like a little bit of a flop house. And Ted fit the description perfect. If Walker's car was the Chevy Chevette the witness saw, and he fit the description, throw that together with a car being set on fire, did Ted have her in the back seat? Did something take place back there? I think that was done to destroy evidence.
Mr. Walker, are you aware that this conversation is being recorded?
Yep.
And
No problems.
You do not have a problem that it's
Nope.
being recorded? Thank
Nothing
you.
to hide.
Mr. Walker was interviewed here by the state police on more than one occasion.
How is it did you first learn of Shauna Howe's abduction? Tim and Jim O'Brien came and told him.
He hears about the case from Jim and Tim O'Brien, who come into his house. He could have made up any name. Nobody would have been able to question him on it.
They just came running in telling me that a little girl, a girl was kidnapped downtown.
Ted Walker says the O'Briens told him about Shauna's abduction. So I asked Chuck Daly, hey, Chuck, do you ever look at the O'Briens? And Chuck said, yeah, they were in jail. They couldn't have done it. That's when I realized I had never seen a report documenting that they had been in jail on the night of the abduction. So that's when I get a hold of Trooper John McClain, who was a friend of mine. I told him, I'd like for you to get out and check if the O'Briens were in jail when Shauna was abducted. And then he came back to me and said, Rick, they weren't there. They had bonded out. Now I'm believing that these guys are good for this. And we've spent all these years and all these resources, all the while believing that they were incarcerated. I'm high on the O'Briens. And I went down to interview Tim O'Brien at the county jail. Tim O'Brien was in jail for sexually assaulting a girl. And his brother, Jim O'Brien, had been arrested by the Oil City police for trying to abduct a woman, trying to stuff her into a trunk. It was really a brief conversation. I said, Tim, would you mind giving us a DNA sample for the Shauna Howe case? And he hesitated just for a couple of seconds, and just the way he responded, he said, well, I'll have to check with my attorney. And as I went to leave, I saw this candy wrapper. chill went down my spine. Chill that starts up at your neck and runs down to your tailbone, and kind of a little shiver. I want to get the DNA because I think these O'Briens are good for this. After all these years, I think we may have finally found the killers. Early February is when I got the call from the crime lab. Jim O'Brien's a match.
When the DNA is discovered, Ted Walker's name comes in as the one who mentions the O'Briens. It just adds up. It is 3 people. Jim and Tim O'Brien and Ted Walker.
Ted Walker was arrested as an accessory to the homicide of Shauna Howe.
We're going to take this back to 1992. We know that a witness saw somebody walk up to Shauna Howe. Isn't that right?
Right.
And who was that person the witness saw?
Me.
Right. So you walk up to her, and as you're approaching her, you ask her what?
She was selling Girl Scout cookies.
Okay. And why do you ask her that?
Because I like working Girl Scouts.
Right, I know that, but
Just make her feel at ease.
make her feel at ease. Then what do you do?
Well, I grab a hold of her and take her back.
Did you grab her? How did
around the shoulders?
you grab her?
Carry it out, hand her to Tim.
You hand her to Tim.
So there's Walker handing her off to somebody, but then there's somebody driving the car. And they're all 3 involved in that.
You get back to your house. What's the next thing that happens?
They come in carrying Shauna. And go up the steps.
The O'Briens, those guys have a little girl that to them, that's a playground.
Once they got upstairs, I heard her screaming, struggling. Leave me go, get off me.
He actually, I think, told them one time he yells at them to keep her quiet, and they want to know, then, how do we keep her quiet? And he says, well, get her some candy.
We picked Halloween night. It was only supposed to be a prank.
And other than Walker, these guys have never talked. These guys have never admitted what they did. But what happened, I think, is they assaulted her upstairs. Then they left, and that's when they went out to Coder's Hole. But this bodysuit, I think they took her and they assaulted her again out there. Now this child doesn't have clothes. So they kept her in that car overnight, in the trunk. She had these brush burns on her knees, and I think that was from the carpeting in the car.
We know we had an alpha male in Jimmy, and he was a true sociopath. We know we have Timmy, who was the follower. Then we have Ted Walker, who plays the dummy, but he's not the dummy at all. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Ted could have been the mastermind right behind Jimmy.
At some point, they decide that they've had their way with her, their pleasure or whatever. Perhaps the heat is on now because there are all these investigators in town, so they decide she can identify us, we got to get rid of her. They take her out and throw her off that trestle. I'm glad for Shauna, but the other thing is, I just feel sad. I feel sad that this happened to her, that she didn't get to grow up and live a normal life.
The detectives of Oil City delivered justice, as the O'Briens and Ted Walker are imprisoned for the murder of Shauna Howe. And after 13 years, the Howe family finally has the truth. And hopefully, some kind of peace.
I think about her every day. I miss her every day. But I can say I love you, Shauna, and go on with my day. I'm not frozen in that time anymore. I love my daughter. I miss her with everything that's in me. But she's not in pain. What they did to her can't hurt her anymore. And I know I still love her till this day. And that's not going to go away, no matter what.